Well, it's around noon on November 15th, and Aaron and I just got set up in this spot that we've never hunted before. Good buck behind her. Good buck, good buck. Well, that's what we came in here for, but unfortunately it was probably just 4 yards too far.
He's really big. Yeah, really big.
That is him, isn't it?
No, that's a different buck.
Well, that pretty much wraps up our night. We're gonna come back in tomorrow for sure.
Oh yeah.
Sit all day just to mess it up.
It's a shooter. It's the one I missed.
Party has left what we are now calling the timber nest.
Midwest Whitetail is brought to you by Hoyt Archery, Fuse Accessories, Realtree, Muddy Outdoors, Cabela's, Rocket Broadheads, Scott Archery, Frigid Forage, Trophy Rock, Easton Arrows, RTP Outdoors, Non-Typical Wildlife Solutions, Ozonics, Wilderness Athlete, Grizzly Coolers, Redneck Hunting Blinds, and Nikon.
It's March 27th, and John and I are going back into an area that we called the Timber Nest. This is where I shot a buck on November 19th, and it's actually really close to an area that we've traditionally had good action in the past. We're at the spot right now where we start our trek-in, and we're going to kind of talk about how we got into this area. We're going to talk a little bit about the scouting of this area, and then we're going to talk about why we thought it worked in the mid to later part of November. So we're going to start walking up the hill here. Actually, the first obstacle to get to this spot is this really steep hill, which right off the bat eliminates a lot of people. And as you can see, there's also this creek right here, which, you know, a lot of people don't want to cross a creek or a really steep hill right off the bat. So we're gonna head up the hill here and head back to the stand location. Well, John and I just got to the top of this hill here, and that's, like I said, the first obstacle of the trek to the stand. And as you walk along this ridge, a lot of people, if they're coming in here to scout now, they would see this main trail on this ridge. There's old rubs, scrapes down through this ridge. And I think a lot of people would think that this is far enough off the road, but in reality, we're probably only 400 or 500 yards from the car, and where we're going is probably still 3/4 of a mile away. So when we would come into this area, we would pretty much burn through this spot as fast as we could. Not really worried about spooking deer. We did spook deer going to this stand, but if we were gonna try to sneak through the whole area and never spook a deer, we would never get to the spot in time. A lot of times we were getting here super early in the mornings, trying to beat daylight, so we would cruise through this ridge. We are at risk of spooking deer, but these aren't the deer that we're gonna be hunting. And as we push further back into the public, the spot only gets better.
There. We need to get to right there.
When walking to the stand, we're going about 1.25 miles back from where we park to the stand. And I like to think of this spot as broken up into two sections of the walk, the fast part and the slow part. Right now, I'm about 1/2 mile from the truck and a little bit more than 1/2 mile from the stand. But at this point in the walk, I'm gonna be a little bit more cautious going to the stand because back there between us and the car is stuff that I'm not really worried about. I know that those deer are probably not deer that I'm gonna be hunting, and if I do push them, I know they're just gonna go back into that security cover in the bedding area that I know is not being pressured very much. So at this point, I'm about roughly a half a mile from the stand. I'm really gonna start slowing down and trying to be super quiet. And another thing that I'm gonna do is really be conscious of where deer can see me walking in at. For example, the stand is to my left here, and if I'm standing straight up, there's a better chance that deer bedded on that hillside over there can see me. So I'm gonna start walking lower and make sure that anything bedded on that hillside can't see me. And I'm gonna sneak right into my stand. Right now, we're less than 100 yards from the tree stand, but we're actually less than 100 yards from the bed that we think that the bucks were using in this timber nest. I think a lot of people would be afraid to get this close to that bed, but we were using the conditions in our favor. We would come in here on windy afternoons with a north wind and walk on the south side of this bedding area super slow. We're walking right on that transition line of that bedding area, taking our time, and we would only walk when the wind would blow. So don't necessarily be afraid to get close to these bedding areas, because a lot of times a mature buck is not going to get up and move a lot in daylight. So we like to stay as close as we can to the specific buck bed that we find in an area, and this is actually how we got to it. There's really no other way to get to this spot other than to walk really close to his bed. But in this case, being aggressive like this really paid off, and we were able to slip in here multiple times and see mature bucks get out of that bed. Right now, I'm standing about 10 yards away from where we found the buck bed this summer. The reason that a buck can bed here, and it's beneficial to him, is he's got wind at his advantage, he can see a long ways, and in this spot specifically, it's just a natural funnel. A lot of deer, specifically does, are gonna come up to the top of this ridge at night and work their way towards the ag fields. When a buck beds here during the rut, he can intercept those does going to their destination food source. And I think that's why we were having so much success back here, is all the deer, like John said, got pushed back into this bedding area from all the pressure in the area, and they could bed here and just watch does come to them. When there's a higher density of does, there's a higher likelihood that one of those does is going to be an estrus. With no pressure back here, a good food source with the crop fields that are further out on this ridge, and a secure bedding area, it made for a great recipe for a mid to late November hunting situation during the rut. When we came in here originally scouting in the summer, we didn't just come in here blind. One of the things that we do all the time is look at maps. You can actually pick out a lot of these areas from maps, and that's one of the things that we're always doing in the summer. Just trying to figure out new locations to go and scout. That way when we go into an area, we've got a purpose. We're looking at those transition lines we've previously picked out, and we're just trying to find if there's a good amount of buck sign in that area. You can do this looking at a map by finding differences in habitat cover. A lot of times we're looking at transition lines like where a hardwood meets a marsh, or in this circumstance, we're looking at where hardwoods meets an old pasture. A lot of times that's gonna create that same habitat edge, and when we came in here, all we were looking for was if there were deer bedding in this bedding area, and if there was a lot of good buck sign. Once we found all three of those factors, we knew it was probably gonna be a good spot. Luckily enough, John and Aaron came in here on November 14th, and were reassured that there was a lot of bucks moving through this area, and we took full advantage of it and hunted it as much as we could for the next week or so. We were back in this spot 4 out of 5 days, and the reason that we were able to keep hunting it is because we were making sure that our entry and exits to this bedding area were bulletproof. Made sure that we had a safe wind direction when we were set up in the stand, and we got away with hunting it, like I said, 4 times in 5 days. When you find a hot spot like this where all the deer are getting pushed back to, this is kind of their last resort. So we were just aggressive and just kept hunting them and hunting them. And to a certain degree, when you've found the most secluded area, the least pressured area, these deer aren't really gonna leave. If this is the most secure spot where they smell the least amount of human sign, they're not gonna totally leave this area. So we just kept hunting it, and the deer were sticking around I'm sure they smelled some of our ground scent in the evenings, but like I said, this was the most secure bedding location on this piece of public, so the deer weren't gonna leave. This is the kind of spot that we target every year when we're starting to look for our new spots on public land. So get out, do your homework, make some plan Bs, and really focus on these bedding areas and transition lines, and hopefully you can find a couple spots like the timber nest.
Today I'm going to go for a walk down to a food plot that we started to build last summer. It was going to be a quick little poor man plot, but we got in there and there was trees everywhere. I thought maybe we'd cut down a few trees. We ended up cutting down 20 some trees, and that left a lot of pretty good sized stumps. And I just didn't feel like that was going to be a good example of a poor man plot. So this is going to be the middle income man's plot because I did have to use a little bit of equipment here. And that's been one of the criteria that we've used to designate the poor man plot, is we just don't use any equipment. But since I had to stoop to bringing in equipment, we're not going to be able to call this a poor man plot. But I do want to take you down there and walk you through the process of how this whole plot location was selected, and then how we started to build this thing last summer, where we're at now with some updates, and then the plan for what I'm going to plant in there this spring. I'm about halfway down to the spot now, and we talk about it all the time, how challenging it is and how difficult it is to hunt down in the valleys. It kind of struck me when I was walking down here that this trail that I cut to get the equipment down in there to do the work may end up being where we place a tree stand. The deer are going to use this trail at least to some degree. Worst case scenario, we may have this food plot down here that's holding the deer right down here, but we may end up hunting them further up on the ridge here. We'll go through it when we get down in there, like I said, but it's the biggest problem you've got with these little valley locations like this is figuring out a way to hunt it. Wow, it's amazing how much different this looks now than when we first started this back in, it was probably May or June of last year, I'm thinking. I mean, off to my left now, it's big, wide open area. Over here, we cleaned up a bunch of stuff. There were 25 or 30 trees, I'm guessing, in here that we had to take out. Some of them were small, but some of them were pretty big trees. We basically came in here with the intention of this being a poor man plot. So we had a chainsaw, a backpack sprayer full of Roundup, and that was going to be everything that we used on this project. And as it turned out, I ended up with a tractor down in here pushing the trees off. They were too heavy for us to carry them. And then ended up with, eventually this spring, late winter, Chad Lathrop came in here with a skid steer with some kind of a tool on the front of it. I'm not sure what they call it, but he gets under the roots and he pries them up with this tool. It's real handy. He took out some pretty good sized stumps. So it's one solution that you might want to look into if you've got somebody in your area that can do this kind of work, or maybe you can even go to a cat rental store or something like that and rent this type of equipment to remove stumps. Without that, I mean, we would have had a real mess in here. So let's take a little look here, and I'm going to walk you through the edge of this food plot. This in front of me, where you see all the dirt, that was a hump. Pretty good sized hump with some stumps on top of it. Chad popped those stumps out and then came in with a little bucket on the skid steer and smoothed that little area out. The rest of it he pretty much left as is. No real amount of dirt work took place on here. I would say it was almost entirely just the natural lay of the land. So while we haven't gotten a long ways away from the poor man plot, we did have to bring in some equipment. And if you see the before and after, it's pretty impressive, the transformation that took place here with a little more than a couple guys with chainsaws and a skid steer with some kind of a stump removal tool. Now I want to talk a little bit more about this location. I like to start these food plots in places where I already have somewhat of a natural opening to begin with. And creating these little small food plots in these locations makes the properties more huntable, but it also increases the value of the property. So when you're making improvements on land that you own, doing something like this is never going to be a bad idea. Okay, now the hard part, and that is how do you hunt these little valley locations? This one, like I said, coming down the hill, I do have the option of hunting the ridge up above it. You're not hunting the food plot specifically, but you're hunting the deer that are more or less using this area, hoping to pick them off on the fringe in a spot where the conditions are more to your advantage. That's the trade-off that we weigh. If I do hunt this, I'm probably going to come in from the south. So then, on a wind that blows from the south to the north, it would funnel right down this valley, and I shouldn't get a whole lot of swirling. I should be able to get away with hunting out of a tree stand on the north edge of this food plot. The other option would be, of course, to bring a redneck blind in here. If you look over my shoulder here, there's a nice little clump of cedar trees that we left standing on the edge. I could put that blind right into that little clump of cedar trees, should be able to get out of it and go straight out the back, down into that ditch, and then follow the creek out. And I think I could do that even with deer in this little small food plot. That's what you've got to consider that, because granted, you know, these small food plots, the deer will move through them a lot quicker than they will in those larger destination type feeding areas, but I can't expect to get somebody to come down in here and bump the deer off this food plot for me at the end of legal shooting time. So these small spots like this, you have to have a built-in plan for getting out of there on your own at the end of legal shooting time. So if I do put a redneck blind in here, what I'm thinking is just set it right here, probably a 5-footer, maybe a 10-footer, and just tip it down into this little gap here between these cedar trees and that locust tree in behind. Then just cut my shooting lanes through the cedar tree. That would pretty well conceal everything from the food plot. And at the end of legal shooting time, I could get down off the back of that blind, and I'll show you where that goes to. There's a real nice ditch right behind us. So there's the locust tree I was talking about, and here's the ditch. And that's 15 feet deep. I'm guessing at least, maybe more. So, you know, it'd be easy to come out of there, swing over a little bit, drop down over here where it's a little bit of more gradual slope and get into that thing. Follow that ditch down, and it meets up with that creek. It's at the very bottom of this valley. Follow that creek all the way out back up to the road. It'd make for a long walk. But this is the kind of spot that you'd probably come to during the rut. You'd get there in the dark in the morning, stay all day, and then leave in the dark at night. So it's not one of those things where you're popping in and out of there for a quick hunt. This one would take a little bit more of an investment, making sure that you did it right. But that's how this one sets up. Let me talk for just a real quick second about what's left to be done here. I need to till it up or smooth it up just a little bit more. And I think since I've already committed to putting equipment in here, I'm going to go ahead and bring the tiller in and till this one. It's a pretty good size. It's probably almost an acre. I might make most of it clover and have one little corner of it be big and beastie, or vice versa. So we'll be back in here in another month showing you the tilling and the seeding of this little small food plot. I think last year when we first started working on this plot, I remember thinking that I didn't have enough interns in the office to get this project done right. I think I might have even said that I was gonna turn it over to some of my employees and then I could just go back to the office. But it's nice to have this thing behind me because there was a lot of work that went into this one. Some of the poor man plots that we produce aren't anywhere near as labor intensive as this one. And we'll do another poor man plot this year. We're not gonna skip that process. It's one that we try to do every single year. So we'll have another one of those coming up for you in the next few weeks. But in the meantime, I appreciate you joining me. And as always, we'll be right back here again next Monday for the next episode of Midwest Whitetail. And remember to always dream big.